store closing, final clearance, everything must go. These signs are appearing more and more often in front of stores that millions of Americans have visited their entire adult lives. These 12 major clothing chains are falling apart in 2026. What stands out immediately is that these are not unknown boutiques or struggling startups. These are names that entire generations built their wardrobes around. Names that once had 600 locations, 800 locations, stores in every mall and shopping center parking lot from one coast to the other. Each one is dealing with a different problem. Some have filed for bankruptcy. Some are quietly closing locations by the dozen. Others are still open but carry something harder to see on a balance sheet. They have stopped being what they used to be. And the customers who once knew exactly what to expect when they walked through the door are walking past instead. That moment, not a press release, is where the real collapse begins. Number 12. Macy's. When Macy's announced it would close 150 stores across the country, the news felt different from other retail closures. Because Macy's is not a niche brand or a specialty retailer that lost its moment. It is the name on the building at the center of the American mall. It is the Thanksgiving Day parade. It is the store that millions of families walked through on the way to everything else. For generations of shoppers, Macy's delivered something specific. A wide selection under one roof, at prices that spanned what a real shopping budget could handle. A $25 blouse on the clearance rack, an $89 dress for a special occasion, a $150 coat built to last through several winters. The range was the point. Whatever you needed, Macy's probably had it, somewhere inside the building. Then things started to change. Macy's began shifting toward premium shop-in-shop concepts and luxury partners, gradually pulling away from the middle of the market, the family shopping for a range of needs at a range of prices, and into a version of itself that was less certain about who it was serving. The experience inside the stores began to reflect that uncertainty. Departments that once felt fully stocked started to feel thinner. The sense that Macy's understood every kind of customer in every kind of budget situation began to fade. The 150 closures being carried out through 2026 are framed by the company as a strategic pivot toward fewer, better locations. But for the communities losing their Macy's, the math is simpler than any strategic pivot. The store that once anchored the mall is leaving, and nothing waiting to take its place does the same job. Macy's is still very much alive, but the version of it that felt like a dependable, all-purpose destination for every kind of family shopping trip is getting harder to find. Number 11. Rue21. There is a generation of teenagers who had a place to shop on a tight budget and still feel like they were keeping up. Rue21. Rue21 understood a customer most fashion retail barely noticed, the teenager in a smaller American city who could not access a major shopping district but still wanted to look like everyone else at school. Rue21 was often the store in those second-tier retail strips and smaller shopping centers, with prices starting around $5 and rarely going much above $30. A full outfit for under $40. Fashion at prices a part-time job could cover. At its peak, Rue21 operated more than 800 stores, not in flagship urban districts, but in the kinds of towns where its customer actually lived. Then things started to change. Ultra-cheap online platforms began reaching those same customers directly on their phones. A teenager who once drove to Rue21 for affordable fashion could now scroll through Shein at midnight from her bedroom and have it delivered to her door in 3 days for less money. In 2024, Rue21 filed for bankruptcy and closed every one of its 800-plus stores. Not a gradual decline over years. A complete erasure from the retail map in a single filing. The towns where Rue21 had been the affordable option did not get a replacement. The strip malls where it held a central spot did not fill easily. The customer who had built her routine around it found that the only store that understood her budget in her town was simply gone. This is what happens when an entire customer's affordable option disappears, not to a better version of itself, but to an app on a phone. Number 10. Express. There is a generation of Americans for whom Express meant one specific thing: the blazer you wore to the job interview before you could afford the job. When Express was at its best, it solved a very specific moment in a young professional's life. You had the offer. You needed to look the part. And you could not yet afford to actually look the part. A blazer that read as $200 cost $49. A pair of trousers that belonged in an office cost $39. For someone walking into their first real job, Express closed the gap between who they were and who they needed to appear to be. The promise was clear: professional appearance at prices a 24-year-old could manage, on clothes designed for someone who was not yet a department store size. Then things started to change. Express raised prices across the board. The $49 blazer became $89, then $129. Promotional discounts were layered on top to preserve the feeling of a deal, but the base prices had climbed. And as prices rose, the quality did not follow them up. Customers who had been loyal for years began to notice that a jacket they paid $110 for did not feel like the $49 jacket they remembered. It did not feel like more. It just cost more. Celebrity partnerships, influencer campaigns, new store concepts. Express spent years trying to feel younger and more current, while the customer who had needed it most, the young professional with a starting salary and a closet to build, found that the same items were now available elsewhere at the prices Express used to charge. In April 2024, Express filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy with over $300 million in debt and closed more than 100 stores immediately. The blazer that used to help a 24-year-old feel ready now costs less at 3 other stores. And Express had spent years forgetting that the blazer was the only reason it existed. Number 9. Forever 21. For under $30, you could walk into Forever 21 and walk out looking like you had spent 5 times that. That was the promise. Not longevity, not quality. Fashion. The look, the trend, the color of the season, at prices so low that if the item fell apart after 6 washes, you had already gotten your money's worth. A $5 top, a $12 dress, a $15 jacket that made you feel like you were keeping up without going broke. The math was so simple it barely needed explaining. For teenagers and college students on tight budgets who wanted to dress like the timelines they were watching, Forever 21 delivered something no other store had matched at that price. Then things started to change, and the change did not come from inside Forever 21. It came from competitors that figured out how to do the same thing even cheaper and even faster. Platforms that could deliver the same prices directly to a customer's door in 48 hours, with no mall, no fitting room, no checkout line. The customers who had built their habits around Forever 21's price floor discovered that the floor had dropped again, and it was now on a screen in their pocket. In March 2025, Forever 21 filed for bankruptcy again and began liquidating its remaining U.S. stores. The brand that once filled enormous multi-floor spaces in hundreds of malls across the country is being erased from the physical retail landscape. A website still carries the name, but the stores where the promise actually lived, the $5 tops, the $12 dresses, the energy of a floor full of everything for almost nothing, are closing one by one. Forever 21 was not beaten because its promise was wrong. It was beaten because it could no longer own that promise. When the thing that made you different becomes what everyone else offers for less, the reason people came through your door disappears. Number 8. Chico's. There is a customer that most of American retail has spent decades pretending does not exist. Chico's knew exactly who she was. A woman in her 40s or 50s with real spending power, professional experience, and a clear sense of what she wanted. Not trend-driven. Not interested in stores designed for 22-year-olds. Interested in clothing that fit correctly, felt well-made, and treated her like someone worth designing for, rather than an afterthought at the back of a clearance rack. At its peak, Chico's operated more than 1,400 locations across its 3 brands. The stores felt calm and considered. Staff stayed long enough to become familiar faces. A customer who found what worked for her at Chico's became the most loyal kind in retail. The kind who came back without a coupon, without a sale event, because the product had simply earned her trust over years. Then things started to change. In recent years, more than 200 locations across the 3 brands have closed. Product lines shifted. Longtime customers began reporting that the quality they had trusted, the weight of the fabric, the way a blouse held its shape, the construction of a jacket, had quietly declined while prices remained where they had always been. For a brand built on understanding a specific woman better than anyone else in retail, That drift was the most dangerous possible outcome. The customer Chico served was not impressed by campaigns or collaborations. She knew what well-made clothing felt like in her hands. When it started feeling different, she noticed immediately. By 2026, Chico's continues to operate but in significantly reduced form. What many longtime customers describe is a quieter version of what it used to be. Chico's did not lose her because another brand did a better job. It lost her by gradually becoming less of what she had trusted it to be. Number 7. Ann Taylor. For a certain kind of working woman in America, Ann Taylor was not a shopping destination. It was a solution to a specific problem. The problem: you needed to dress professionally for a demanding workplace, and you could not spend boutique prices to do it. Ann Taylor made that gap disappear. A blazer that read as executive cost $89. A sheath dress that belonged in a boardroom cost $119. For women who needed to look like they belonged in rooms they were still earning their place in, Ann Taylor got them there. That trust was not built on fashion. It was built on fit, consistency, and the knowledge that a suit purchased this season would still feel correct 3 years later. Then things started to change. Following a bankruptcy that closed hundreds of locations and reshaped the company entirely, Ann Taylor relaunched under new ownership. But many longtime customers noticed something in the product that no press release mentioned. The blazer at $89 did not feel the same as it once had. The lining was thinner, the fabric lighter, the construction slightly less careful than the price still implied. For a brand built on simple, honest quality at a middle-class price, that shift was not a minor adjustment. The women who had trusted Ann Taylor to help them show up seriously discovered the product no longer fully matched the standard the name had always stood for. By 2026, Ann Taylor has returned to some locations it had once left, but the customer who made it what it was is now being asked to pay the same prices for a product that no longer quite delivers what those prices have always been meant to represent. When a brand promises quality at a specific price and then quietly delivers less, the customers who came for the quality notice first. And they are always the last ones to come back. Number 6. Foot Locker. It is hard to believe that a brand this visible is on this list. Foot Locker. For generations of sneaker buyers, Foot Locker meant one thing above everything else: access. The staff in the referee shirts knew the product. The store carried the shoes that mattered: the Jordan release, the Nike collaboration, the Adidas drop everyone was tracking. On release day, Foot Locker was where the line formed. Being there in person gave you a real shot at the shoe that would sell out online in 4 minutes. The promise was not just the sneaker. It was the destination, the certainty that showing up was worth something. Then things started to change. Nike, the brand that built the majority of Foot Locker's traffic and cultural identity, made a deliberate decision to sell more directly to consumers through its own website and stores. As Nike pulled back its exclusive inventory from Foot Locker, the selection inside the store changed. The shoes that had made people stand in line were less reliably there. Foot Locker has announced plans to close more than 400 stores by the end of 2026. What Foot Locker had truly been selling was access, the certainty that if you showed up on the right day, you had a real chance at the shoe everyone else wanted. When that certainty became unreliable, customers went to Nike.com and took their chances there instead. The referee shirt is still on the staff in the stores that remain, but the reason that shirt used to mean something has quietly walked out the door. Number 5. Kohl's. Less than 15 years ago, Kohl's had figured out something most of retail never manages: how to make customers feel genuinely smart about spending money. The system was almost engineered for loyalty. You arrived with a 30% off coupon. You bought what you were already planning to buy. At the register, you received Kohl's Cash, a certificate that pulled you back within 2 weeks. Every trip rewarded the next one. Shopping at Kohl's did not feel like spending. It felt like winning. For families on real budgets, that feeling had real value. The clearance racks regularly turned up name-brand clothing at 70 or 80% off. A shopper who knew Kohl's well could walk out with a full cart and feel like she had beaten the system. The coupons stacked on the sale price, stacked on the Kohl's Cash reward, made every transaction feel like a calculation she had won. Then things started to change. The coupons got smaller. The fine print grew longer. Kohl's cash came with more restrictions on when it could be used and what it applied to. The clearance racks grew thinner. Base prices crept upward, which meant the percentage off had less to work with. More than the math, the feeling started to go. A customer who spends 40 minutes working through coupon conditions and leaves the store unsure whether she actually saved anything has not had a satisfying trip. She has had a complicated one. In 2026, Kohl's continues closing locations and faces pressure from investors questioning whether the model still works at all. Kohl's did not lose its customers because they stopped wanting deals. It lost them by making the deal harder to trust. When the store that once made you feel like the smartest person in the room starts making you feel uncertain, the reason to go back quietly disappears. Number 4. Gap. There was a version of Gap that understood something almost no clothing brand in history has managed to hold on to: the power of the perfect basic. At its best, Gap sold the t-shirt. Not a collaboration, not a limited release, not a branded piece designed to be noticed. The white t-shirt, the navy crew neck, the chino that fit correctly and lasted long enough to matter. A Gap customer could walk out with a $20 tee and a $38 chino and feel like she had gotten something exactly right. Not fashionable, just right. The promise was not style. It was the American wardrobe, solved. The fit was reliable from year to year. The quality was honest. The price felt proportional to what you held in your hands. Then things started to change. Gap's identity began drifting from the basics that built it. The brand started chasing trends it was not positioned to own, partnerships it could not sustain, a younger customer it could not define. Meanwhile, the t-shirt that had made Gap famous got lighter. The stitching grew less consistent. The price climbed as the substance came down. By 2026, Gap has closed hundreds of its namesake stores and continues searching for a clear reason to be chosen over the options that now exist on both sides of it. Uniqlo for essentials at lower prices, and better quality brands at higher ones. A customer who once walked into a Gap and immediately knew what she was looking for now walks past and keeps moving. The sign is the same. The t-shirt is technically still inside, but the certainty that made it feel like the answer to a question has been replaced by just another option. Number 3. J.Crew. There was a time when the J.Crew catalog arriving in the mail was itself part of the experience. J.Crew built a very specific kind of aspiration. Not luxury, not fast fashion. Something between. The considered American aesthetic at prices that felt proportional. A $45 Oxford shirt that lasted a decade. A $68 chino you bought in 3 colors because it worked for everything. A cashmere sweater that held its weight and shape after years of wear. A J.Crew sold quality at a price that made a customer feel she had found exactly the right level. Not overspending, not compromising. For customers who discovered it in their 20s, J.Crew became part of how they understood good clothing. The brand had a clear opinion about what right looked like. For a long time, that opinion was simply correct. Then things started to change. After filing for bankruptcy with approximately $1.65 billion in debt and relaunching under new ownership, J.Crew continued to operate. But many longtime customers noticed something in the product that no press release addressed. The $45 Oxford shirt was now $95, and it felt lighter. The cashmere sweater that once had real weight was noticeably thinner. Prices had gone up, while the substance that had justified those prices quietly came down. For a customer who had stayed loyal specifically because J.Crew delivered honest quality at an honest price, this was not a small shift. The brand that had given her a clear, trustworthy answer about what good clothing costs had started asking her to pay more for less, without acknowledging that anything had changed. By 2026, J.Crew continues to operate, but the Oxford shirt is not the same shirt, and the customers who remember the difference know it the moment they pick it up. Number 2. Victoria's Secret. There was a version of the Victoria's Secret semi-annual sale that felt like it had been planned specifically for you. Twice a year, the sale transformed what was already an accessible store into something else entirely. Bras that usually cost $55 went for $25. Panties were $10 for $35. Pajama sets and loungewear marked down by half. Lines formed before the doors opened. Regular customers marked the dates months ahead and organized their schedules around them. For a customer who timed her shopping to the sale, Victoria's Secret delivered a specific promise: lingerie and loungewear that felt genuinely luxurious, at prices that made building a real wardrobe of it feel possible. The brand understood it was selling more than a product. It was selling the version of yourself that felt completely put together, even in the most private moments of the day. And for decades, it made that version affordable. Then things started to change. The semi-annual sale got smaller. Discounts narrowed. A bra that used to feel like a reasonable splurge began to feel like a significant purchase even at the sale price. The size range, which had always excluded a large portion of American women, did not expand meaningfully as the conversation around it changed completely. Other brands arrived offering the same promise more honestly. Third Love with half sizes and comfort-forward design. Airy with real inclusivity. Skims with loungewear built on what customers actually asked for. By 2026, Victoria's Secret has closed more than 300 locations. The annual fashion show has been canceled. The Angels have retired. But what customers felt most was smaller than any of those announcements. The semi-annual sale no longer felt like it had been saved for them. When the event that once made you feel like the store's most valued customer stops feeling that way, the store stops feeling like yours. Number 1. JCPenney. The number 1 spot on this list belongs to a name that is not just a store. It is a memory that belongs to tens of millions of American families. JCPenney was built to serve a very specific customer. Not the wealthiest, not the trendiest, but the family that needed to dress 4 people for back to school on a real budget. The woman who needed a suit for the job interview she could not afford to miss. The family that made a December appointment at the portrait studio and still has those photos in frames on the hallway wall. For generations, JCPenney delivered something that sounds simple, but is nearly impossible to maintain. Reliable quality at prices that felt honest and fair. A dress shirt for $22 that did not look like it cost $22. A pair of jeans for $19 that lasted long enough to matter. You walked in knowing approximately what you would spend and approximately what you would walk out with. That certainty was the product, just as much as anything on the shelves. Then things started to change. After filing for bankruptcy with approximately $500 million in debt and closing more than 200 stores, JCPenney was acquired by its mall landlords and kept alive. The name stayed on the buildings, but the business underneath that survival decision continued to struggle in ways that showed up clearly inside the stores themselves. By 2026, the locations that remain often feel understaffed and inconsistently stocked. Prices have risen without a quality story to match them. The portrait studios are largely gone. The departments that once made a single JCPenney trip feel complete have been reduced or removed. The customers who still go are overwhelmingly those who remember what it was. They return not because the current store has given them a new reason to come, but because the memory of what it used to be still pulls them through the door. When those customers stop coming, there is no generation behind them that has ever experienced JCPenney at its best. And no one who has never known what it was has any reason to walk in for the first time. JCPenney is still there, but the store that once knew what your life cost and met you there has slowly become a store still searching for why it should exist. This is what an institution built on a century of honest value looks like when the promise it was built on quietly fades away. After all 12 names on today's list, the pattern underneath every single one of them is the same. None of these brands are struggling because Americans stopped needing clothing. The need never went away. What went away was the specific promise each store had made, and kept, long enough for millions of customers to build real habits around it. Rue21 used to be the only affordable option in towns that had no other. Express used to close the gap between who you were and who you needed to appear to be, for $49. Forever 21 let you dress like the trend pages for $12. Kohl's made you feel like the smartest shopper in the room every single visit. Victoria's Secret made the semi-annual sale feel like it had been saved just for you. JCPenney knew what your family's life actually cost and built an entire store around that exact number. Each of them at some point drifted from that founding promise. Prices moved faster than quality could follow. The experience inside the store stopped matching what customers had organized their shopping lives around. And when that happened, the one reason to choose that store over any other began to quietly disappear. The most telling moment was not a bankruptcy filing or a closure announcement. It was the moment a longtime customer walked in, looked at the price tag on something she used to buy without hesitation, and quietly put it back on the shelf. Not because she could not afford it, but because it no longer felt like the store she had come for. When fitting rooms that used to have 30-minute waits on Saturday mornings are empty by noon, and parking lots that used to overflow on weekends are half full by mid-afternoon, the real question is not which clothing chain closes next. The question is whether any of them still remember the one thing that made millions of people trust them in the first place, and whether they have the courage to become that again before the last customer who remembers walks away for good. Leave your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.